This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Welcome to a conversation about the state of mental health in the workplace, a topic that's rewriting the rules of modern work culture. Any 21st century organisation has outgrown the carrot and stick management era of the past. Well, hopefully. And any 21st century organisation understands that its human resources are not merely resources, assets or chess pieces. The business that does not recognise the complex potential of its whole workforce will not be a thriving place. Increasingly, work is an integral part of living, not the work-life balance, but maybe the work-life blend. And we can often spend more time with colleagues than we do with our own families, so in return, more people demand careers that makes them feel part of something bigger than a to-do list. So why in 2019 did the UK's Health and Safety Executive report that stress, depression and anxiety accounted for over half of all work-related ill health cases? It's a grim statistic. But maybe it's better than it was. In the same year, the Mental Health Foundation reported that 70% of employees felt that their employers cared about their mental health, compared to 55% just a year before in 2018. 25% increase in 1 year. Progress, no matter how incremental, no matter how erratic, it's got to be good, right? In this episode, we're exploring how brave employers should be putting well-being and welfare at the top of their priorities. Has it gone too far, with new generations unrealistic about what they are entitled to? Or are we still falling short, hoping that AI and automation will simply get rid of expensive and whinging people for good? My guest today is a coach, a strategist and a facilitator with a mission, a specialist in resilience and mental toughness in leadership, with over 2 decades of experience in corporate giants like Harrods, IBM and Rolls Royce. She's a champion of mental health at work. And as the founder of Strategist Coaching, she wants to help forward-thinking organisations reshape how they approach well-being. Her recent clients include police forces, banks, transport networks and big tech giants. She's not just going for the easy ones. The lens of practical bravery that we're considering in this episode is focused on how organisations and employees better manage stress together, boost performance and feel productive without feeling poorly. I'm Richard Freeman, and this is the Possibility Club. I'm delighted to introduce you to Anna Golawski. Hello. Welcome to the Possibility Club. As you can probably hear, I'm outside. I'm sitting in the delightful Pavilion Gardens in Brighton. And I'm Richard, by the way. You should know that. I'm sure you tune in every time. It's a little bit drizzly, but it's a lovely July afternoon. And as ever, I am going to be chatting to a very interesting guest about change, about bravery in business, and about some of the new thinking in the 21st century that might be on our minds, or certainly should be. And it's really nice to be doing a conversation face-to-face, because often this is done via the magic of Zoom. And my guest today is Anna Golawski from Strategist Coaching. Normally I ask people where they're calling in from and how they're doing, but you're here right next to me, so I've got an idea. But how are you doing?
Well, you've just taken me out for a lovely lunch, so I'm doing absolutely great, thank you very much. Yeah, Friday afternoon, looking forward to the weekend, so very well, thank you.
It was a lovely lunch. So you're in the business of well-being, culture, people. Tell me a little bit about why a business is starting to talk and think about that.
Great question. I think, and definitely from the years that I've been doing this line of work, so I do lots of coaching and training and facilitation for organisations, I've really seen a marked increase in terms of getting mental health and well-being and looking after people up on the agendas. I think, and quite rightly, we've moved away from the very old-fashioned kind of 1970s, 1980s style of management, which is very much sort of, carrot and stick. You came in to do a job, you did your job, you got paid, you went home. And I think because we're so much more tied up into our work, we look for careers where we've got value, where we've got things which are aligned with our goals, our beliefs and our purpose, it's important that we also have organisations that look after our well-being, because my view, and this is what I say to all of my clients, is that people are your number one resource. We employ people for their brains, we employ people for their mental well-being, to make the good decisions, to be logical, be analytical, creative, solve problems, come up with new ideas. And if we're not looking after the brain in the same way that sports people look after their physical energies, then we're going to get people who are tired and burnt out and not being able to be as effective, productive, and that has a massive impact not only on the work and their productivity and their effectiveness, but also their enjoyment of life as well. And when I first started trying to talk to organisations over a decade ago now about looking after employees' well-being and managing stress and pressure and building up resilience, I was either met with two broad themes. Either companies didn't want to acknowledge it or talk about it. It was almost like, let's brush it under the carpet, because if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't address it, then it's not happening. Or I think they thought I was going to turn up in a big caftan with my incense sticks and getting people to sit around on beanbags chanting, which is, nothing against that, if that's your thing.
You don't do that?
I don't do that. I'm not against it, if that's your thing, if that works for you, absolutely brilliant. But I think what is really great is that organisations are really much more understanding around mental health and wellbeing and why it's important. Saying that, I still think there's a long way to go. So many organisations are very much doing things reactionary, so they're waiting until there's high turnover rates, high sickness rates, high levels of stress reported in engagement surveys. I really want to get across to organisations that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So do this to help everyone thrive, not just focusing on the people who are just trying to survive.
So what brings someone into coaching and, being that critical friend, that external trainer, guide, helping businesses to walk through that? What led you to kind of thinking, actually, there's a role for me here to go in and help organisations do this better?
So my backstory in a nutshell is quite a varied corporate career. So I started off in the early 1990s working at Rolls Royce Aerospace up in Coventry, which was fantastic insights, working in their training department in a very big manufacturing, unionised, clocking in, clocking out environment. I also worked briefly in Harrods in their recruitment department in London, and then most of my career was working at IBM in their marketing department. So I've had a variety, in addition to other shorter temping type works. I've been exposed to quite a variety of different workplace cultures, different management styles, different leadership styles, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And that really was the catalyst for me to focus particularly on mental health and well-being, based on my own experience of having burnout. And I wish that I knew, and I wish that my manager at the time had known what I know now back then, because then things could have been different. So that underpins a lot of my work in just trying to help managers be better at their jobs. But it isn't just totally confined to mental health and wellbeing. That covers a lot of things, such as having a really good team vision, so people are aligned, understanding what motivates people, having really great communication, thinking about the day-to-day habits that we do as well, and the feedback. My interest, particularly in coaching, came through my MBA that I did at Henley Management College, and my dissertation was looking at coaching and performance, and I was like, I love this. This is much more exciting to me, the whole thing about people and the difference that makes us all totally unique in the workplace, and what works for one person may not necessarily work for somebody else when it comes to performance. And I just realised that I preferred people more than I liked computers. So long story short, massive career change, and I've been doing this field of work for about 15 years now.
Do you sense anything different now about attitudes, about mechanisms, about language used in recruitment and in learning and development versus how it looked in 2008?
Yeah, and there has been various ups and downs and changes, and some of the issues that were very present when I first started back in 2008, so you mentioned the financial crash, is also happening now with massive interest rates, redundancies across different industries as well. So Some of the sort of the common themes, I guess, that I see is around, and particularly when it comes to recruitment, is people are much more clued up in terms of the culture of the organisation. It was always very seen that it was the interview and the weighting, or the purpose of the interview is very much on the employer to find out all they can about the employees. So what we're seeing a lot more now is that actually employees are asking a lot more incisive questions about the culture, about the leadership, about the well-being, and how they're going to be sort of treated. I think there's much higher expectations when people join organisations. I still think there's quite a way to go to get that sort of proper, genuine psychological safety, because despite having laws in place to protect people if they have a mental health issue and they need to take time off work, the vast majority of people would still rather cite another reason for it. So there is still definitely room for improvement going forwards. And also one of the other big things that we've noticed, particularly amongst younger people, is that when they're joining organisations, they're looking for organisations that are much more aligned to their values and purpose driven. So they're leaving university with huge amounts of debt. The parity between what they earn and what they can afford on a mortgage is just so far apart that a lot of them are saying, well, if I'm going to be sort of working 5 days a week for the rest of my life, then I want to do something which is meaningful and has purpose. It isn't just about working to pay the debts and pay the rent going forwards.
I had a meeting this morning with a client, and we were chatting about this, and particularly with sort of Gen Z, whatever. And they had an interesting question for me, and they wanted to know, what I was kind of coming across in terms of this conversation about perceptions and expectations at work. And they said, for them as a business, real big focus on mental health and well-being had been quite transformative over the last few years, because they're in quite a high-stress sector. But they said that one of the challenges they've got, certainly with some of the younger employees, is maybe confusing discomfort with a kind of feeling unsafe. And they said that they had, that actually a lot of their junior staff were, when things went badly, or when they had to, maybe they felt embarrassed because something had gone wrong, or they had some critical feedback because something hadn't worked, that actually what they jumped to quite quickly was that they felt unsafe. That actually that was a challenge to their kind of psychological safety, and that wasn't appropriate. And for some older managers, that's quite a tricky thing to navigate, because from their perspective, there's a difference between psychological safety and having a shit day. Has that come up at all, or do you have a view on that?
And that ties in really nicely to the work that I do around building resilience and mental toughness with leaders, managers, but also younger people, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, and all of that kind of stuff. We can't avoid difficult stuff that we're going to have to face. We are, highly likely at some point going to deal with constructive feedback, negative stuff, criticism, tough events and stuff like that. And I think the important thing is to build up our coping strategies, to think about, ourselves, what's working for us, how we can learn and grow, and sometimes reframe situations. And when I talk to people about emotional control, it's about what can you look at a situation and learn from it. So don't see it as a huge setback, but actually think about the coping strategies. But also this is where support networks are really important, to have people to talk to offload to. Sometimes you just need a really good cup of tea and a bloody good bitch and a moan about things. Sometimes it's then identifying actually you do need a bit of help, support, advice, and that could be through coaching or mentoring. But I think the key for anyone, and and not just sort of young people, but I think sort of new managers and new leaders, is coping with the tough times, because success and well-being isn't just about when things are going right and things are going according to plan and we're meeting all those targets. Actually, that resilience and that success is when things aren't going to plan, when we're not meeting our targets, when we're getting sort of the tough feedback from senior people in authority or sort of clients who aren't happy with us. It's how do we respond and bounce back to that. And I think one of the phrases that I like, and I think it came from boxing, possibly Mike Tyson, but don't quote me on this, is that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think that so true for everyone, whatever line of work you're doing. It's what are you going to do to bounce back, and not be defined by setbacks, but look at how you can learn and grow from them.
was getting punched in the face, and I was getting punched in the face by Mike Tyson, and they're different ends of a spectrum. But I like that. That's a nice mantra.
This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible. But who are we?
Always Possible works with ambitious businesses, charities and public services that are thinking about what's next.
From architects to aerospace companies, puppet theatres to primary schools, business networks to big data analysts.
If you're wanting to be brave with some big decisions or to be clearer about what to prioritise, then an award-winning workshop from the Always Possible team is a brilliant starting point.
We care about just one thing: building ideas that work.
For creative, intuitive and practical expertise, consider Always Possible as your strategic partner. Find out more about how we could power up your mission. Visit alwayspossible.co.uk.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Measuring good mental health and good culture is far more difficult than measuring, financial performance or, how many employees, even productivity, whatever that actually means, is more easy to measure than health, well-being, happiness. I know there's the happiness index. I know that some big corporates are finding ways to measure that, but in lots of small companies that's going to be a big challenge. Not long ago I was in a pub not far from here, and on the table next to me there was a group of very clearly disgruntled workers that had finished somewhere for the day, effing and jeffing and slagging, and I'm just saying, very vocal, saying, this is terrible, we're very badly treated. Disconnect between management and people on the shop floor is so, and then they started talking very openly about which company it was, and I was gobsmacked because it's a company that has a reputation and plays on that reputation for being a fantastic place to work, and has won many, many awards for its sort of people focus. And so, that really challenged my thinking about, okay, what lies beneath that? What happens when something goes wrong? Is a measure of success about what that means different when you're in the executive team to perhaps if you are, in a more frontline role on minimum wage? How do you know when you kind of maybe walk away that company's really conscious of what success looks like for them?
It really starts with having a very clear vision about what they're wanting to achieve with their wellbeing strategy, because if that isn't clearly defined, then all they're going to be putting into place is a whole string of ad hoc initiatives which aren't really going to achieve anything. So when I sit down with organisations who want to improve their wellbeing, it's looking at what are the drivers of that. What's their data behind that? Is it sort of turnover? Is it sickness rates? Is it productivity? Is it anecdotal comments that they're feeding, that they're getting fed back either from their sort of the management team or engagement surveys? What is their wellbeing vision and strategy going to achieve? So unless that's really clear from the start, it's not going to sort of live up to its success. But also making sure that you've got proper top level commitment to it, and not just necessarily from people-based roles such as HR, but from a very diverse range of functions, so that it's really sending a clear message that wellbeing is important to everyone, not just people managers and HR managers. And then it's making sure that things are genuine, that you really want to help and support people, and getting lots of feedback, because I've worked with organisations, and the one that I'm sort of thinking of, it wasn't to do with wellbeing, it was to do with diversity, and they were absolutely fantastic. As you said about the client that you overheard being talked about. Publicly, they were all, supportive of gender diversity and sexual orientation, and they had all the bunting out and the rainbow flags when it was Pride. But actually, in some of the focus groups that I was doing, you start scratching beneath the surface, and that was great for the, the PR, the marketing, and the external communications. But actually, internally, it was a very different story. So it really just have to make sure that it's effective, and there's a genuine intention and purpose, and you've got the commitment and the resources behind it, but find out what people want, and also be very clear on what your measurement of success is, so that you know when you've achieved something, is that sort of data driven, is it anecdotally driven, what does success mean to you, and also what does success mean to individuals when it comes to their work-life balance and well-being as well going forwards, because again it's going to mean very different things to different people.
And what about you in your work? Do you set yourself kind of change goals? Are there really tricky organisations that you work with that actually think, this year I want to take on some real challenges and move them from A to B, or there's a new kind of thinking in the world of psychology or science that I want to try and introduce to some companies in a new way? Or did you find your work is just very responsive to kind of where they're at and what they need at that point? Just interested to whether there's any new methodologies or strategies that you try and introduce as this kind of this understanding of this evolves.
One of the things which I'm really taking interest in over the past year or so is the subject of neuro leadership. So it's really looking at the neuroscience when it comes to management and leadership in organisations, and there's a huge crossover and influence with mental health and well-being as well, and that's something which I'm really intentionally planning to incorporate in more of my work going forward. So really helping people not understand what they do, the decisions that they make, the habits, the communication that they do, but really trying to enable people to understand the science behind it and why, and take some of the research that they do in the labs with people in the white coats and actually say, and this is how it's going to be showing up on a day-to-day basis. And it's really my aim is really to try and help managers be better managers so that they can support their teams in terms of the well-being. A lot of that starts off with having a really clear team vision, what's the purpose, what's the identity, what's the North Star of the team. So many people talk about metrics and targets or OKRs and objectives and stuff like that, but it's like, but what's the bigger stuff? What's the why, what's the how, what are you about, what do you want to be known for? And I think without that, people are very uncertain. They can't quite see where they link in, what their purpose is, and it can really help with engagement. And we know that when people do feel engaged and they've got that clear direction, it's really good for their well-being, because they know that what they're doing is appreciated and valued going forwards as well. So neuroscience, and particularly neuro-leadership, is one of the things which I'm really excited about doing a lot more work in going forwards. I find it fascinating, and just looking at some of the research, some of the studies that they've done, and thinking about, well, how can this show up on our day-to-day work to make people better is my interest area.
That's really interesting. And I get, from my experience running a small business, so I'm fairly confident that there's a joined up thinking around that in terms of the team. But what I'm failed to do is that what that doesn't mitigate is how much bloody hard work we have to do as a small team, because we don't have the resources. And sometimes having a really big, ambitious, grand purpose when you're a small team can be just as exhausting as not sometimes. Do you ever work with managers that say, actually just be realistic about what people can actually do, and where people feel productive, and spotting the signs of when people, if they are exhausted, if they are flagging, just creating space?
Yeah, and it is something which I hear from a lot of managers. And so when I'm doing the coaching, quite often the first couple of sessions are talking about their business, their team, their strategy, their goals, and then once we've built up the relationship, it then starts turning towards around the burnout, the stress, the pressure, and the demands on them. And we tend to find there's that middle management squeeze. They've got this the pressure from the top, and also they're trying to look after and support their teams as well. The key principle is that we all have limits, absolutely, without exception. Our mental energy is finite. We can't go on forever and ever. We're not designed as human beings to have that real intensive focused work that we need to do. It is absolutely vitally important that we do take those breaks regularly, not only during the day, but also at the end of busy times, to have that downtime. I think it was Microsoft who did some research. They did some brain scanning, and it showed the brain activity during the day if people had just gone from one meeting to another meeting without the break, and how that impaired and affected their mental energies and their stress rates, versus if they'd incorporated even short micro breaks between each meeting. So it's then getting people to think about what can I do on a practical basis even to allow 5 minutes before each meeting. So rather than just automatically scheduling back-to-back meetings and looking at your calendar as if it's a Tetris game, actually get it into the company culture and habit that you have 10 minutes. We don't need all the time to have a full 60 minutes. We can probably achieve the same amount of discussion and content and agreement within 45 or 50 minutes and have that break. But also make sure that people have that downtime to pause and reflect, giving them the time and the space off. And it is no longer a badge of honour, I don't think, or not so many organisations, because at one time it was that badge of honour to say, right, I've been working, all day and all night and I haven't had any sleep. And we're really understanding and appreciating the importance of sleep and rest and downtime much more. But it's doing it before you get to the point where you really need it. It's again, prevention rather than the cure.
I hope so, and I think probably that is, I'm sure that's right in a lot of sort of organisations when it's thinking about its kind of workers. Still an awful lot of this kind of hustle culture stuff on LinkedIn, though. The sort of one-upmanship of, by 6 o'clock in the morning I've already done a 10k run, I've written half a novel, I've looked at the stocks and shares, I've traded, I've earned 4 million, before you even got out of bed. Probably some people who still work from home feel they've got to go that little bit above and beyond to demonstrate that they are as productive. It's easier to schedule Zoom meetings back to back, and I've definitely been guilty of, having 4 or 5 hours straight of online meetings, which I probably just wouldn't do if I was in the real world, because I'd go, I'd make sure I'd go and make a cup of coffee, but you just don't do that at home because you think it's different. Hopefully that's changing.
It is a little bit, but being humans, what we know and what we do tend to be miles apart. We all know we should be eating 5 portions of fruit and veg every day. Doesn't mean that we do it. So it's about creating those habits, and it takes around 2 months for a new habit to become automatic in us. And when I talk to people about well-being, it's trying to think about, well, what are the little habits you can do on a daily basis that you can start with now? It doesn't have to be big stuff. We're not looking for massive life-changing things, but just the little things that that work well for you, that's good for your mental health and well-being, and also being able to keep your mental energies topped up so that you can be productive, effective, and make really good decisions. And we always clean our teeth every day. We don't wait until we've got toothache to start cleaning our teeth. We do it to prevent problems arising. So it's trying to think about our mental health in the same way. And one of the things that they talk about from a neuroscience perspective is the healthy mind platter, and is looking at things such as exercise, it's looking at social time, it's looking at creative time, it's looking at just downtime, when you're not doing anything, you're not scrolling, but you're just letting your mind wander, and it's just giving that front bit of our brain, the real the clever part, the prefrontal cortex of our brain, just time just to switch off, relax, and let the creativity, the other parts of our brain take over and have a chance to shine as well. But managers need to role model these behaviours as well. They need to create that permissive culture that it's okay to take time off. You shouldn't be back-to-back meetings every single day. It's that that false notion that if I'm really busy and at my desk and on a meeting, then I'm being productive. Then you're absolutely not. And I remember talking to a client of mine a few years ago now. She was a author. And she got into a really good routine. So she'd do the school run in the morning, she'd come home, she'd have a coffee, she'd sit in the morning and be writing on her book, and then she'd have the afternoon off to pick up the kids, be with the kids, and do all of the the home stuff. And that was great until she was up against the deadline from the publisher, and that's when she'd try and work throughout the whole day and the evening as well. And she quite quickly realised, and she noticed that when she sat down the next morning to have a look at what she'd done the day before, it was rubbish. It either needed heavily editing or starting from scratch. And actually, she said, it's not effective. I may as well stick to my routine, what works well for me, when my mental energies are high, and I'm making really good decisions. And, that applies to everybody. We think we're superhuman, but there was some really great research that they did on judges, and these judges were on a parole board. So judges, we know, super intelligent, and we rely on them to make, hopefully, and make really good decisions which are affecting people's lives. And research showed us that the judges on the parole board, when the prisoners came up on the parole board first thing in the morning, they were statistically significantly more likely to be set free because the judges had mental energies, they were refreshed, they'd had their breakfast and coffee. if the judges were seeing a prisoner on the parole board later on in the morning, just before the lunch break, the chances of that prisoner being set free were minimal. Because their mental energies were tied. It was harder to overturn the original decision. So in the workplace, not many of us are making sort of parole decisions, but actually just have a think about the people decisions that you're making. Are you giving the same benefit to the person that you see at the end of the day versus the person in the morning versus the person on Friday afternoon? We're not infallible.
There's an amazing book by a writer called Dan Pink called When. He's one of my favourite writers on human psychology in business. He's drawn on a lot of science to show that, between kind of 2 and 4 in the afternoon is when we're at our least energetic. We have a real lull in our energy kind of, late afternoon. And he did a study of just how many kind of FTSE 100 or Fortune 100 businesses, some of them dealing with, billions and billions and billions of pounds worth of financial decision making. When did they have their board meetings? The vast majority have them at that time. Sometimes on a Friday, and he just said, actually the real impact of a group of people who are at their tiredest or at their lowest energy, getting together and making decisions that affect the entire world was outrageous. And they tried some controlled experiments about moving them, and actually just changing the timing and changing how they did those meetings really changed some of the impact of the decisions that they made and how thorough they, how much better considered they were. And it's a really interesting book. I don't know if you've come across it, but I would recommend it.
Yeah, I do like his work, yeah. The other thing when you're having a meeting is not to have a plate of biscuits in the middle of the table, because that depletes your mental energy, because we're unconsciously trying to resist having a biscuit. That we actually, they've found that people get tired quicker if there's a plate of biscuits in the middle of the table. So top tip, think about your meeting.
Crazy, that's interesting. What is there anything that's better? Is fruit better? Is a chicken balti? Be interesting to know what foods actually kind of make you perk up.
One of the books which I've just started reading recently is a great book called Fortitude by Bruce Daisley. And it's looking at resilience in people. There's lots of great books out there for sort of leaders and managers as well. I like Daniel Pink, as you said. There's also Daniel Goleman. So yeah, I think it's about sort of finding what works for you. But I would really encourage people to have a look at information about neuroscience as well. If they want to be really great leaders and managers and looking after their teams going forwards, understanding how and why our brains work in certain ways so we can look after them really well going forwards.
And one of our past guests has been Dr. Charlotte Ray, who is a neuroscientist looking at the 4-day week, and she's been doing some clinical trials on that. Anna, thank you so much for being on the Possibility Club and being my guest in the park. I've enjoyed looking at how many people have been looking at us thinking that we must be famous because we're sitting here and I've got a microphone in your face. So I bet all those people are going to go home and say, I saw Meryl Streep, she was being interviewed. I don't know, who knows? But it could be quite interesting what urban myths we start to create.
Love it.
But thank you so much.
Pleasure. It's been so much fun. It really has. And we didn't get attacked by the pigeons and the seagulls.
No pigeons, no squirrels, no seagulls, and no rain, thankfully, because that would have destroyed my laptop. But thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Possibility Club Practical Bravery. If you enjoyed this episode, do like, share, review, tell everybody about it. Look in the show notes for all the details of today's guest, stuff we talked about, stuff that's of interest, new things to read, new things to listen to. And if you are running a business or a charity and you are trying to accelerate or improve the impact that you have in the world, if you want to be famous for what you do and what you change rather than just what you sell, then talk to us. alwayspossible.co.uk. We want to hear from you, we want to talk to you, we want to amplify and elevate your ideas, and who knows, we might be able to help you feel more confident and clear about what's next. alwayspossible.co.uk. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new special guest and a new insight on practical bravery in action.
The Possibility Club is an Always Possible podcast. The interviewer was Richard Freeman for Always Possible, and the producer and editor was me, Chris Thorpe Tracy, for Lo-Fi Arts. Have a good week.
alwayspossible.co.uk
Low-Fi